Well, good morning. Welcome to our apologetics class. We're going to do an introduction to apologetics today, so I hope you find it really useful. And a lot of people say apologetics, kind of an odd term, and I agree, it comes from the Greek, but we engage in it all the time. For example, you may come out of a movie theater and talk to a friend about, gee, wasn't the directing of that excellent, or what happened to the dialogue? I just fell flat. And you end up discussing the movie, and you have a different perspective, you liked it, your friend didn't like it, and you go back and forth about the successes and failures of the director and the actors and the special effects and things like that. Maybe you argue sports. You say, we've got to get rid of that general manager. We should trade that center fielder. We need to do something about filling up the stands. Why don't they have special events? Whatever it is. Well, when we conduct these kinds of discussions with facts, hopefully, on our side, we're engaging in apologetics. This is apologetics. Apologetics is a logical defense, and that's the key, isn't it? A logical defense for what we believe in. It's a Greek word, and it's like a legal term that you're giving a defense in a court case. And so we want apologetics in Christianity for several reasons, and I listed them up here for you. One is to gain confidence. So that we come out of this class and we engage in the real world because we believe it's true, not just that it feels good to be a Christian. We want clear thinking. We're going to have a lot of challenges. Do you think the world today challenges Christianity? You bet. So we want to have good, clear ideas of what we believe in. And then finally, we want to have courage. We have confidence. We go out and we can interact with people knowing we have truth on our side, but doing it with grace. And we're going to come back to that more than once. So we're not engaged in a shootout. We want to deal with people who are made in the image of God and to be kind as we work with them. Well, is apologetics part of the Bible? It is. The New Testament is just full of passages dealing with apologetics. This is probably the key one up here. It's the foundational verse for apologetics. This is 1 Peter. And what does it say? But in your heart, set apart Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect. So I want to break apart just pieces of that verse there. Always be prepared. Not once in a while. Always be prepared. The other day I was out working in the garage, had the garage door up, and somebody was walking by, had a skateboard under his arm. And he kind of looked at me, and I looked at him, and he paused, so I walked out, and I said, can I help you? And he said, I'm lost. And I said, you mean as far as the street you're on? And he said, no, I'm lost. And there was something about his voice. I said, are you lost physically, or are you lost spiritually? And he said, I think spiritually. And all of a sudden, I wasn't ready for it. I didn't plan on this. All of a sudden, we were in a discussion about Jesus Christ and what he did for us. And I thought, wow, that's so bizarre. I wasn't expecting this at all. So it says we're always supposed to be prepared. We might be out mowing in the yard and our neighbor walks by. We might be at the water cooler at work and somebody comes by and we get a discussion going. We might be sitting around having a Thanksgiving meal and somebody says something across the way. These things just fall into our laps and we need to always be prepared. And it says we have to give an answer to everyone. It might be a younger person, it might be an adult, it might be a co-worker, it might be a boss. But we have to do it with gentleness and respect. We're going to come back to that again and again. Gentleness and respect. These are fellow human beings. These are not targets for us to hit them with apologetics. Are there other verses? Yes, all over the New Testament. For example, Colossians says this, see to it that no one takes you captive through hollow and deceptive philosophy. So let me ask you, is there hollow and deceptive philosophy out there today? Oh, big time. There's so much false philosophy going on out there. We're supposed to be ready for that. And we're supposed to have a defense up. And Christian apologetics provides the defense against problem philosophies. But not only are we supposed to have a good defense set up to protect us, 2 Corinthians says this, we demolish arguments and take captive every thought. So we can not only defend ourselves, but we can knock down problem areas that may be out there that cause other Christians to stumble. Here's one in Titus. Paul says, in your teaching, show soundness. Notice he doesn't say in your teaching, be sure to get them crying. He doesn't say in your teaching, Be sure to emotionally involve them. Tell them good stories. That isn't what he says. Paul says sound teaching. Good, clear, logical reasons for what you believe in. Paul, all through his travels, when he's going from church to church to church, what do we hear? We hear him reasoning. He reasoned with them. He reasoned in the synagogues. He argued persuasively, it says. So Paul didn't walk in, play a mournful tune, and give them a weepy story and have them come forward. He argued with them. He took the Bible. He took the Old Testament passages. He told them how Jesus Christ fulfilled these Old Testament passages, the purpose of Jesus, what his life was all about. So there's Paul using apologetics. So what's the value? Why do we want to spend time on it? Well, how about the fact we would like to change our culture? Wouldn't we? This culture is in a mess. It believes less and less. It seems more and more illogical. The morality seems to have fallen off. We need to change this culture. We can change the culture. We can do it. We want to show the value of truth. This is a society, frankly, that's pretty cynical about truth. It says, well, that's just your truth. No, we say Christianity is not just true for me, it is true for everybody. And finally, we want to show Christians can actually think. You know what? This is the way the world sees us as Christians. I hate to say it. This is the way they see us. It's goofy. Goofy's hooked himself. He's fishing, and he's hooked his own pants, and he thinks he's got something. He's delighted. Well, Christians are seen this way as kind of bumbling, maybe good-spirited people, but not very sharp. Mark Twain once said, this ties right in, faith is believing what you know ain't so. See, we're people of faith, so therefore we just believe stuff that's not true. Bill Maher, a little bit more modern, said this, faith is a lack of critical thinking. So you got critical thinkers. Gee, who would that be? Oh, Bill Maher and friends of his. So you got your critical thinkers, and then you got Christians, not really critical thinkers at all. Sam Harris, a modern atheist who's written and successfully published a lot of books, he said, theology is now little more than a branch of human ignorance. So here we are at church. We are in that category of ignorant versus the brights. So we represent the dark ages, we represent the lack of critical thinking skills. Not true. Christianity is based on good evidence. It's based on clear thinking. Jesus offered evidence. There's Old Testament evidence. I just want to tell you a story, though, that I saw in a local magazine called The Reader. Apparently on Saturdays, I don't know if they still do it, but groups could set up little tables in Balboa Park in San Diego and attract people to come over and talk to them about whatever. So you've got some Christian groups, and you've got some atheist groups, and you've got Buddhist groups. You've got all these different groups that come out there. And so the Reader sent a reporter, and he talked to the atheists. He said, so what do you find out when you talk to the Christians? Well, here are two stories. One, an atheist said, you know, someone will walk by and say, I'll pray for you. And I'll say, I'm going to think for you. One person said, don't bother. Now, isn't that sad? From a Christian perspective, all they did was walk by. They didn't engage the atheist. Instead, I'll pray for you. Well, that's a pretty flippant response. I mean, I hope that was legit, and I hope they really did go and pray for that person. But instead of walking up and saying, I have good evidence for Christianity, they wanted to go right on by. Here's another story from another atheist there at his table. This gentleman got frustrated because he couldn't get his point across. So he got out his Bible at the top of his lungs, started reading off, in the beginning, God created the world. And he started screaming, God is real, I believe in God. And he walked away. Now, I bet that really made an impact, don't you think? No impact at all. They probably looked at him as another oddball, or maybe looked at him as a typical Christian. Oh, that's painful to hear stories like this, but that's the way the world sees us. So we want to study, we want to find out the facts from history and science and philosophy and know that there are good reasons to support the truth of Christianity. We want to be case makers for Christianity. We can do that through apologetics. And after all, what's our ultimate goal? Is it just to win arguments? No. We want to bring people to the cross of Christ. Amen? That's exactly what we want to do. Let's talk for a few minutes about misconceptions about apologetics, because people are a little fuzzy about it. So here's one. When you say, well, apologetics is arguing for the truth of Christianity, what's the first thing a lot of people think of as far as an argument? They think of a finger coming into a chest. They think of spit flying. They think of neck muscles and veins starting to bulge, and the furrowed brow and a red face and a defensive person. That's not it at all. What does it mean to argue? What is an argument? An argument is a statement that you think is true, and then you support it with evidence. You can do that around a kitchen table. You can do it very quietly. You can do it with a sense of humor. That's what an argument is. Make a claim and support it. Here's another, I like this guy. Here's another misconception. People think, oh, you're interested in apologetics. Well, you're white, you're old, you're male, and you dress with a tweed jacket on and puff a pipe. It's for intellectuals. It's for people to sit around and discuss obscure theological issues. No, not true at all. We just read. Peter says everybody's supposed to be an apologist. In fact, one person said this, we're all apologists, it's just that some of us are better than others. Well, if we're all apologists, let's be the best apologists we can be. Another misconception. How do we carry it out? Do we do it like these guys? This is high noon. I used to love Westerns, so I found a Western picture. High noon, the two guys are facing each other. Wham! Got him. Whew. Put the gun back. Now I can put another notch on the gun belt. That's not Christian apologetics. We treat people as those who are from God. They're children of God. They're made in the image of God. They're precious human beings. We want to treat them with respect. I've said that before. I'll probably be saying it again. Some people say, well, are you trying to say apologetics saves people? No, that's not what we're saying. The hand comes down from above. God reaches and God saves. No doubt about it, no argument about it. That's up to God. Well, if that's the case, what can it do? What's the point? I don't know if you've ever had a garden or you've had some area you really wanted to show off, but you had to pull weeds out of the way, and then the flower or the vegetable or something had room and it looked beautiful. That's what we're doing with apologetics. Think of it as clearing the brush. We're trying to get the misconceptions out of the way, the misunderstandings, the things that people don't really know about the Bible. They're not sure of when it comes to Jesus. They're not sure of about the existence of God. And we can do that. We can pull some of the brush, some of the weeds. We can pull the weeds out of the way to show who Jesus really is. Here's another misconception. We sometimes don't engage people because we think we have to have all the answers. Do we? No. We don't have to have all the answers. Does that take some of the pressure off? Absolutely. You know what we can say? Somebody throws a hard question at us. We haven't thought about it before. Pretty simple. I don't know. But I'll find out. I'll get back to you. That's a good question. So we don't just say, hey, I don't know. But we follow it with, great question, I'll go take a look. Honest to goodness, nobody is going to come up with a question to you that hasn't been asked before. There are answers. There are wonderful answers. There are tons of good Christian apologetics websites that will give you answers to absolutely anything anybody will throw your way. Here's another thing that people are a little hesitant about, another misconception. They think that somehow people that have large number of degrees after their names, brilliant people, PhDs, doctor this, doctor that they know so much. Well, they may know a lot about their area. They don't know everything in other areas. I'll give you one example. This is Richard Dawkins, again, one of the famous atheists of our time. He once said, he had read somewhere and he believed that Jesus never lived. Well, even atheists said, Richard, what kind of work are you doing on this? And he backed up later. He said he was mistaken. He did believe Jesus lived. So just because Dawkins has all sorts of degrees after his name, PhDs and things like that, he can make mistakes. In fact, people often make some serious mistakes when it comes to theological issues, when it comes to Judaism and Christianity. It's amazing. They've spent their whole lives suppressing the truth and they don't even know it. They don't understand anything about theology. They don't know anything about the New Testament. They don't know anything of science and how science is starting to point to God, not away from God. So let's do this. The next part here, let's talk about tactics. So we've got some head knowledge. That's great. But who cares about the head knowledge? We want to get out in the world. We want to interact with people on the job. We want to interact with students. We want to interact with our family. We want to interact with neighbors. How do we do that? Well, we're going to talk about two types of interaction. One, we're going to talk general tactics briefly, and then I want to spend more time on specific tactics. So here we go, general tactics. Let's keep it simple. A lot of people want to do data dumps. They've learned all this new stuff and they're so excited. And that's great. I hope you do learn some new things in apologetics. But then immediately they want to go out and say, you know what I found out? And then they just dump stuff on a person. Let's wait. Let's see what the person really wants to know. Let's keep the answers simple. Secondly, and this sounds crazy talking about this in a church, let's start without the Bible. Well, don't misunderstand me. If the person is asking a Bible question about, well, I'm reading in Romans, or Paul is saying such and such, or in Genesis, okay, then you're in the Bible. Obviously, talk Bible. But I'm just saying in our society today we have people who are either biblically illiterate, they don't know it at all, or hostile to it. And the minute you say, well, Romans says, well, Colossians says, the shield is up, the defense is there, they don't want to hear it. And you can argue effectively without using Bible verses for the existence of God, the reality of Jesus, the existence of the soul, the reliability of the New Testament. We don't need the Bible to make these cases. We ought to have resources. I'm going to mention at the end today. Email me. I'll give you a lot of resources. It's Gary at Apologetics for Life. All one word, Apologetics for Life, F-O-R, for life. .org, apologeticsforlife.org. I'll send you all sorts of resource material, lists of good books, of good websites, of good magazines, all sorts of things that might help you out. Another point, general tactic. We better admit it if we don't know the answer. Let's not fake it. Let's not give a false answer. They find out later on it's false and they say, I wouldn't bother with that person anymore. He or she gave me an answer, it wasn't true. Let's be honest. Let's seem like real people out there and say, I don't know. I don't know. It's a great question. I'll check. I'll get back to you. And then finally, you saw the Richard Dawkins picture. We should question authorities. Just because somebody is a quote-unquote authority doesn't mean that's the final answer to things. Let's look and let's take our time before we say that person is correct. Okay, let's talk specific tactics. I would suggest a book everybody should have. It's by Greg Koukl, and there's his last name, K-O-U-K-L, Koukl, Greg Koukl. He has an organization called Stand to Reason. He's got this thin book that is powerful. It's called Tactics. So I'm going to teach you two tactics today. There are two questions. These are the foundational questions that you ought to master when you're dealing with somebody who's not a Christian. So here's how it works. Somebody makes a claim to you, and the first question is, you just want to know what they're saying. So you say, what do you mean by that? Could you explain that? What are you trying to get across? So notice you're not being argumentative. You're not saying you're wrong and coming at them like a bulldozer. You're saying, could I get some clarification? What do you mean? Once you understand what they mean, here's the second question, powerful question. Why do you say that? What are you asking for now? Some reasons, some support. Remember, that person's the one who made the claim. Where does the burden of responsibility lie? Not on you to contradict it, to find out what the person meant, and then let them have the weight of the burden, I guess you might say, of the proof. They have to offer the proof. So it takes the pressure off you. It shows that you're interested in the other person because now you have a conversation. You're asking them questions. It gives you time to think of an answer. And it works great. Let me just give you some examples. Somebody says to you, I'm just going to pick a couple of these because of time. Somebody says to you, the Bible's been changed over the years. Well, the first question ought to be, what do you mean by changed? If they just mean it's been translated, there's no argument there. If they mean certain verses got changed, somebody put new words in, somebody took words out, now you've got a discussion going. Somebody says to you, the fetus is human. Okay, I'll give you that. The fetus is human, but it's not a person. You use that first question again. What do you mean by that? What's the difference? How's a fetus different than a human? It's a human being, but not a person. What's the difference between those things? Christians are narrow-minded. Well, first question again, what do you mean by that? And what are some examples? Why do you say that? By the way, I have a sneaking suspicion. Somebody says Christians are narrow-minded, they mean you think you're right, which of course is kind of silly because the person thinks he or she is right and is challenging you. So I think that one kind of self-destructs. How about one of these others? I believe in evolution. Well, what do you mean by evolution? Well, from molecules to man. Okay, do you have some proof? Give me some examples. Again, you're not being snotty, you're not being a smart aleck, you're just asking for some clarification there. Here's a second tactic to think of. So you got those two questions. What do you mean by that? Why do you believe that? Here's another thing. Look for, and they're all over the place, what are called self-refuting statements. Things that just don't work right. They are suicide comments. So here are some examples outside of the area of Christianity. Somebody says to you, I can't speak a word of English. Time out. You just spoke a word of English. You spoke a whole sentence of English. That statement then you can ignore. It makes no sense at all. Somebody says to you, I told you 1,000,000 times not to exaggerate. Well, wait a minute. You exaggerated. I can ignore your statement because you're not following your own statement. Here's one final one. All English sentences are shorter than 4 words. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 8. And that's an English sentence. So obviously that statement is false. Now what does this look like when it comes to Christianity? Let me just give you a few of them here. I bet you'll catch on really fast. Somebody says you shouldn't make moral judgments. What did that person just do? That person just morally judged who? You. So you can say, well, aren't you judging me when you make that comment? Oh, all right, there goes that statement out the window. How about the second one? There are no ultimate absolute truths. There's no such thing as ultimate truth. Well, what did that person do? That person just gave you an ultimate truth statement. So that one just blew up. It just exploded itself. Don't force your morality on me. What did that person do? Just forced his or her own way of dealing with things onto you. Christians are wrong to judge others. Then why are you judging me? One of my favorites here, again, I'm going to skip one, but Bill Nye, the science guy, the little bow tie guy, he's pretty popular right now. He said this. He was talking about abortion. Now here we go again. Here's Bill Nye. He's a science person. He's getting into the field of morality. He's starting to drift from what he was good at. He said, I know nobody likes abortion. Okay. But you can't tell somebody what to do. What did Bill Nye just do? He told us what to do. And he's saying we can't tell people what to do. Well then, Bill Nye, you got nothing to say on the topic. Do you see how that self-destructs? Here's another tactic. It goes by different names. I just call it take it to the limit. I guess because I like the Eagles and they had a song called Take It to the Limit. Here's what you do. You find out what the other person believes, and then you show how absurd it gets when you stretch it and use that same principle in other situations that seem more far-fetched. And they'll go, oh, that's silly. Yeah, it's silly because your principle was silly. So here's an example. Somebody says, well, homosexuality is a natural urge, so it's okay. So you say to that person, okay, so your principle is that any natural urge is okay, because you're giving an example. Homosexuality is a natural urge, therefore it's okay. You're saying any natural urge is okay? Really? So what about rape? That's a natural urge for some people. So that's okay? No. What about smashing somebody in the face with a fist? That may be an urge. Does that make it okay? And they're going to say, well, no, that's silly. Yeah, it's silly because the principle is wrong. They may have other reasons for homosexuality. That's fine. We can take them one at a time. This is a terrible reason for homosexuality. Let's try a few more. Again, time, tick-tock, so we're not going to do all of these, but how about same-sex marriage is fine since they love each other. What's the principle? That anybody who loves somebody else should be allowed to marry that person. Isn't that the principle? A male loves another male, they ought to be allowed to marry. A female loves another female, they ought to be allowed to marry. Well, let's try that as a principle. So what are you saying? Any two sentient creatures who love each other should get married? a man and his Cocker Spaniel. Oh, that's silly. Yeah, I agree. That is silly. What about two brothers? What about a mom and her son? They may have a strong bond of love. Is that okay if they get married? What about two law partners? Should they be allowed to get married? What about 5 people? They love each other. What about 10 people? They live in a commune. They all love each other. Should they be allowed to get married? Well, do you see that principle of as long as you love somebody, it's all right to marry them? It's a really, really bad philosophy. What about a 10-year-old and the grandfather of that 10-year-old? Terrible idea. But if they love each other, this principle seems to work. How about, I personally don't like abortion. I've heard this from politicians, by the way, before. I personally don't like abortion, but I don't want to force my morality on you or the country, so I won't say anything about it. What's wrong with that? Well, let's think about that for a minute. I personally don't like abortion. I don't want to force my morality on you. Let's try something else. How about slavery? Would this have gone over big in the 1800s? Somebody says, like William Wilberforce, who fought slavery, he said, well, personally I don't like slavery, but I don't want to force my morality on you. Well, the slave would have said, please force your morality on our society. Let's change it. Let's get rid of slavery. Look at the last statement. Women should have the right to choose abortion. What's the principle there? Everybody should have the right to choose whatever they want to do. Well, what's that called? That's called anarchy. You can't choose anything to do in this society. You can't go 85 on the freeway. You can't zoom through a school playground area in a car. You can't set things on fire just because you feel like it. You can't yell fire in a crowded movie theater. So you don't have the right to do anything you want. America is not total pro-choice. There are limits, and now we have to decide, is abortion a good place to have a limit? So, summary, as far as these tactics go, ask those 2 key questions. What do you mean by that, and why do you say that? Why do you believe that? Look for those self-refuting statements. And then finally, take the argument, look for the principle, and then stretch it further than they're comfortable with. I wanted to share with you something, since Jesus is the heart of Christianity. I wanted you to see something regarding the use of our minds. Christians have kind of gotten flabby when it comes to thinking. In Deuteronomy, it says this, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength. So somebody asked Jesus, what are the greatest commandments? And he recited this, but he changed it just a little bit. He said, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. So it's great to have a love in the soul. It's great to have passion for Jesus. Nothing wrong with that. But we need to also engage our minds to be part of that Christian faith. So, how about a few things to carry away as we begin to wrap up here? The results are not up to us. It's up to God. Isn't that nice? That takes that burden off of your shoulders. Jesus is going to take care of it. God's going to take care of it. Our job is just to be faithful. We should have a modest goal. Greg Kokel said, I just try to put a stone in somebody's shoes so they walk away going, that's a really good point. So it's just a metaphorical statement. Most people have really not thought through religious ideas. They haven't. They don't know the first thing about the Bible. They don't know the first thing about any theological issue. You will be far more comfortable than you think you might. We get better through practice. That's good. It's good to know. A friend of mine had this on his heart to deal with Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons. So he spent a lot of time with them. But at first, they just beat him up one side and down the other. Not physically, but they threw out ideas. He said, I don't know. So he got really confused by that. But he got better. He kept working on it. Facts and reason are on our side. That's good to know. We have the truth. Jesus really did live. Jesus really did rise from the dead. Make sure our ideas offend, not our behavior. That's crucial, isn't it? The ideas should offend, not our behavior. Jesus can be offensive to some people that don't want him in their lives, but the way we present it should be full of grace and truth, as we talked about before. So here's the picture. We should be like somebody sowing grass seed. We lay it out there, and if it grows or it doesn't grow, that's up to God. It's up to the natural way it works. The pressure is off of us. As a conclusion, Rick Schenker, who is the president of Ratio Christi. By the way, Ratio Christi is a great group. It's an international now college club for Christians who are interested in apologetics. So he said this: people will only become Christians when they're persuaded that Christianity is true. People only stay Christians if they believe Christianity is true. The job of the apologist is to show that Christianity is true. Salvation is a supernatural work, but who ever heard of someone being a Christian that didn't first believe it was true? Isn't that a good point? Why would you be a Christian if you didn't think there was truth in there? If you thought it was just the make-up stuff? I want to tell you a real short story here that has some power to it. There was an early Christian martyr named Ignatius, a leader of a church. He was a student of John, the Apostle John. So he heard the whole story. Can you imagine sitting there and having John talk to you? He was a church leader, and he was finally arrested, and he was sent off to be put to death. And on the way, it was a long process, and he stopped at several cities along the way and had time to write some letters. And they have those letters today. You can go online and read those letters. I'm quoting just pieces of these letters, and you'll see how it ties into apologetics here. He said, "Our Lord was truly of the seed of David and the Son of God. He was truly born of a virgin. He was truly under Pontius Pilate and Herod the Tetrarch nailed to the cross. He suffered all these things for us, and he suffered them really. And not in appearance only, even as also he truly rose again." How many times do we see that word really and truly? Ignatius is going to a certain death. He's absolutely sure that he's going to die. And as he's walking along, can you imagine he's kind of recreating those stories that he heard from John? And he says, "I may be going to my death, but I know it's true. I know there's life after this. I know Jesus has me in his arms. I know I'm going to be okay." And so the apologetics carried him to his own martyrdom. Let me just suggest real quickly some resources you might consider. Lee Strobel has some Case for books. Two of them here, The Case for Christ and The Case for Faith. Excellent. I don't have enough faith to be an atheist. I think if you had to have one book sitting on your shelf that covers apologetics, this would probably be it. There's that Tactics book that I mentioned. There are DVDs out there. This is put out by True You. You can look them up. And then I thought this was a nice conclusion. This is from Chuck Colson. If our culture is to be transformed, and I think we want that badly, it will happen from the bottom up, from ordinary believers practicing apologetics over the backyard fence or around the barbecue grill. And that's my challenge, and that's my hope for all of us, that we don't just sit and learn these things, but we go out where we meet real people. So if you have questions, please contact me, Gary at apologeticsforlife.org. I can send you notes on this, send you a resource list, answer any particular questions you have. I'll give you recommendations of other books and other resources. So let's accept that challenge. Let's go out and hang over that fence with a neighbor. Let's sit at that table with somebody, and let's share the good news. Let's be case makers for Christ, case makers for Christianity, because it's true. We have the truth.